Doing a video today here on front end suspension components. The reason I want to do this video is some upcoming videos that I'm going to do. We're going to replace some of these parts, and I thought there might be some value in explaining how these parts all fit together. So I've made a fancy high-tech device here to kind of try to lay out how a lot of these front end components fit together. So wherever you see 2x4s here, this is the, we'll call it the stationary part of the vehicle. And these other components are the parts of the suspension of the vehicle. With the exception of this one 2x4 here, which is going to be this 2x4 down here, our lower control arm. So that is actually a moving part of the vehicle. So the reason I want to lay this out is because all these moving parts are where basically metal is meeting metal, and even if they're grease-packed fittings like tie rod ends or ball joints, like anything else where metal is meeting metal, eventually it's going to wear. So, to simulate this, to show what I'm doing here, we have our upper control arm, we have our steering knuckle, right here is the wheel, and our drive shaft to spinning it, like so. So, as technology has changed over the years, and just about every vehicle on the go is front wheel drive, which is an awesome system, because with front wheel drive vehicles you have all the weight, especially in the wintertime, over your spinning wheels. So the weight of the engine and all the components are there. Now the problem with front wheel drive vehicles is it's made a little bit more complicated for backyard mechanic types like myself and most of the people that are watching these videos. There's some additional components in here that we didn't have to worry about before. Now, one thing with a rear wheel drive vehicle, in the good old days, you had a drive shaft going to the rear wheels, and you didn't have to deal with this type of scenario that we have here. This is our drive shaft, and as it's spinning, it's connected over here basically to your transmission and your engine over on this side. So it's turning, but as it turns, our front wheels are hitting bumps. So I'm just going to try to simulate this. Here's our lower control arm, we hit a bump. So we see all that stuff moving up and down. We have up here our upper ball joint in our upper control arm. That's moving. Down below here in our pretend lower control arm, this 2x4, we have the lower ball joint. It's moving right there, so that's another point of wear. We have our wheel bearing inside our steering knuckle here, and the hub assembly. I'm going to actually do another separate video on wheel bearings, just simply because that will be a point of contention. So you have all these parts moving and wearing. And as I say, I just move my bar up here, and we'll see how this whole assembly is moving up and down. So over time, these parts are going to wear where they all join up together here. Now here's what I was talking about with our front wheel drive vehicle. In amongst all of these components, we have our drive shaft turning here. Now this drive shaft, because as these, say we hit a bump here, the length of that drive shaft is basically changing it. The distance between the transmission over on this side of the vehicle and over here is changing. So if we can get my videographer over here, we'll have a look at how this drive shaft goes here. What happens here is that there are little units like this, and we see that they all have to spin too, because if you can see that, that is actually designed to move in and out the transfer case, fitting on here. So we have yet another part that, even though it's all greased up with drive grease, it's going to wear over time too. And this is something we're going to be changing out in an upcoming video. This is drive shaft. So if we move this boot back, the boot is obviously there to keep from debris and everything from getting in there, but this whole unit is spinning. It's spinning that way, and it also has to be able to spin. We have a universal joint inside there, because it has to be able to turn our wheels like that, even while obviously our wheels are changing at an angle like this. So there we have another point of wear within our CV joint, and the boot that's hiding it is a wear point there. Okay, just for a second. Okay, this is a steering rack. We're going to do a video in the future replacing one of those. I'm just showing it here, a separate video on how that works and fits together too. But I just want to show that on the end of the steering rack is our tie rod end. And this tie rod end connects out here on the end of our steering knuckle. So as all of this scenario is happening that we talked about, with our drive shaft turning, spinning our wheels like so, when we're driving and we turn, what happens is our steering rack pushes out or pulls in, depending on what way we are turning the vehicle. So again, tie rod end is another point of wear, and these tie rod ends have the ball joint inside here and the rubber boot, grease filled, and as I talked about, they'll wear anyway. They'll wear because they're moving constantly. Well, with the exception of the fact when the vehicle is just moving straight ahead like this, but as soon as you turn it a little bit, pushes out on the steering knuckle, pulls in on the steering knuckle. So basically, another point of wear. I did a video on replacing those, but that's how they fit together. And just quickly, because I'm going to do another video too on wheel bearings, but this is a steering knuckle. I think it might be from the same type of vehicle, doesn't matter if it isn't. This unit here is this part here minus the rotor. There's the hub, bearings inside here. That spins, and the bearing is another very common place for wear inside that. And another front end suspension component, this is the biggie, is the whole strut assembly. So this design here, we have the coil spring, the whole damper mechanism, the damper fork down here. So this whole strut will fit down over our pretend lower control arm down here, and there's a big bolt that'll go through the end of the fork, through our lower control arm, and as we hit the bumps and this whole assembly moves up and down, our strut is absorbing all of that force. Now it's probably worth mentioning that this in this design of this vehicle here, this particular vehicle had an upper control arm. Some vehicles don't. It just depends on how they're designed. And in that scenario, the only thing that's the major component that's holding this whole thing together, as far as from the lower control arm up to the actual chassis of the vehicle, is this assembly here. And those struts obviously are something that are going to wear with time. Description in the next video of the steering components and the steering rack.